Hi everyone, it's Laura here for Studio Katia, and in today's video I'm going to share with you how to create a super fun and super easy thank you card using the Sweet Thanks stamp set. I started by doing some die cutting to create the base for my card. I have some Nina Desert Storm cardstock that I die cut with the Darling Ribbon and Dotted Frames dies. This gives me a rectangle which is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And then I also cut some vanilla cardstock using the loop dies. I'm not going to use the frame die cut for this project, but I can use it for another project later on. I then moved on and started creating my background, and for that I used the ink splash stencil as well as the brush stroke stamps. I felt that these fit perfectly together, especially this circular stamp made me think about a stain left by a coffee mug on a table, so I decided to combine them. I'm using Seal Brown ink by Spectrum Noir, both for my stamping and for my ink blending. These aren't really meant for stamping, but the result was good enough. I wasn't going for a perfect impression, and actually it was surprisingly good. I wasn't expecting it. Anyway, for the ink blending, as you can see, I'm using my Studio Katia blending brushes and my Make Art Station to hold the cardstock and the stencil in place. And then I also decided that I wanted to stamp a couple more images from that brushstroke stamp set, again using Seal Brown ink by Spectrum Noir. I then moved on and started working on my images. As I mentioned, I'm using the Sweet Thanks stamp set by Studio Katia, which is coffee themed and is a lot of fun. For today, I decided to switch things up a little. I've been using my alcohol markers quite a lot lately, so I'm going to do some coloring with Prismacolor pencils on craft cardstock. I switched up the inks. This is Memento Dewdrops in the color Rich Cocoa. It's a dark brown ink, and this is actually meant for stamping, so that's why I used it for my images, because here I wanted a clear stamped impression. The coloring didn't take too long, the images are quite small and I also didn't stamp a ton of them, so this went by pretty quickly. I'm using a bit of a different technique for my coloring today, and instead of adding the shadows directly along the stamped lines, I'm leaving a little bit of a blank area and I will fill that in later on with my lightest color. This is something you can do with any coloring medium, and I think it adds a lot of interest to your colored images, so it's definitely something that I'll be featuring more and more in my future cards. When I use colored pencils, I make sure that my tips are sharpened at all times, and I keep sharpening them as I color because this gives me a lot of control and it helps me layer my colors better, which in turn means that I'm going to get a nicer blend between the different shades that I'm using. I'm not going to show you the coloring for each and every image in this card, but I will show you each color combination at least once, and you have seen already that the names, or rather the numbers of the pencils that I used, are on screen for your reference. While I finish coloring the images, I just wanted to remind you that if you do enjoy this video, you can give it a thumbs up and leave a comment in the comment section down below, as well as subscribe to this channel for more card making and paper crafting inspiration if you're not a subscriber already. And I also wanted to let you know that this Friday, May the 1st, I will be live on the Studio Katia Facebook page and on the Studio Katia Facebook group. The live will start at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and I'll be making a card with you guys. If you join and comment during the live, you will be also entered to win a $15 gift certificate to the Studio Katia store. So if you are interested, I will have all the information as well as all the relevant links in the description box down below. At this point, my images are all colored in, and one thing I always do when I color with Prismacolor pencils is to go over the stamped lines again with a pencil that matches the color of the ink I used for stamping. In this case, because I used a brown ink, I'm going in with a brown pencil, and I do this because Prismacolor pencils are waxed base, and whenever you go over the stamped lines, which is kind of unavoidable I feel, you are going to hide them a little bit. And with this extra step instead, we make sure that we have nice, vibrant and defined stamped images again. At this point, we can go ahead and die cut the images with the coordinating dies to the Sweet Thanks stamp set. I secured them to my cardstock with some purple tape so that the dies wouldn't shift, and then I ran everything through my die cutting machine. I also decided that I wanted to add a little bit of extra detail to my background, and so I took the image with the coffee beans from the Sweet Thanks stamp set and I'm stamping it on the background at random. I'm using the same ink that I used for my images. It looks a little bit darker than what I have on my cardstock, but on the one hand it will fade a little bit as it dries, and also I don't mind that there is a little bit of variation in the depth of my browns on the background. For my sentiment, I have a strip of brown cardstock that I am cutting with the Darling Ribbon and Dotted Frames dies. This will create a dotted detail on the edges of this strip, which will match nicely with what I have on the background. I'm using the grid on my mat to make sure that everything is straight, and then I can run it through my die cutting machine. This is a step that you can totally skip, but I think it adds a bit of a finished look to the card. I'm going to do some heat embossing for my greeting, so I am prepping my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool before stamping my sentiment with embossing ink by Wow, coating it with vanilla embossing powder and then melting the embossing powder with my heat gun. The reason why I chose vanilla rather than white is to match the color of my cardstock on that front panel. You could use white as well if you didn't have vanilla, but if you have it, I think it's a nice touch, so everything matches together really nicely. At this point, everything was ready and I could go ahead and assemble my card. I coated the back of this die cut with some Studio Katia liquid glue, making sure to have it everywhere but not to add too much because we don't want it to ooze out, and then I adhered it to my background. You can see now that all that pattern is a little bit hidden by our front panel, but it shows through pretty nicely and adds a bit of interest to the card. I decided to raise my sentiment and my images on some foam tape, and I'm using black foam tape by Studio Katia because my sentiment banner is so dark. I then adhered the images at the top and I ended up using just 3 images. I'll show you what I did with the rest of my images later on. I added those with some foam tape as well, and then for a finishing touch I decided to adhere some gold foil confetti around my images on the top left and on the bottom right. I'm using again Studio Katia liquid glue and my embellishment wand to pick up the confetti and then adhere them to my card, and then I moved on and started working on my card base. This is some heavyweight white cardstock that I cut to 4 1/4 by 11 inches and I scored at 5.5 inches, and here is where the other images ended up in my card. I decided to decorate the inside too this time. So I stamped one more greeting from the Sweet Thanks stamp set, and this also matches the theme of my card, and then I adhered the 2 extra images on the bottom right corner. There is plenty of space for a personal message inside, but I think the extra decoration makes this card even more special. I adhered everything to my card base and here is the final result. It was pretty quick and easy to put together, but I think it turned out really cute. I especially love all those splatters in the background. And that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for more card making and paper crafting inspiration. Thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.